Hello, everyone. This is Kaizen Base. Today we will learn about the difference between operating rate and operational availability.
Though both of the management indicators can be written in the same kanji, the purpose of their usage as indicators is actually different. This time, we will learn about the difference between the meaning of the two indicators and the purpose of operation.
So, let's get started with the lecture.
Mio, good morning. Do you know Kadow Ritsu?
Mr. Kai, good morning. Why do you suddenly ask me this? I heard of Bekido Ritsu before, but I don't know the details.
Really? So do you know Kadow Ritsu?
Yes, of course.
I see. Well, I suppose you have to learn the difference between Kadow Ritsu and Bekido Ritsu. Especially Bekido Ritsu is a distinctive idea among the management indicators of the Toyota production system.
I see. Please tell me the details when you have time.
Okay, let's go to the seminar room now. Please gather all the managers there.
Oh, I've got it.
Well, there are two equipment management indicators in Toyota production system. One is the operating rate. The other is operational availability and read as Bekido Ritsu in Japanese. Let's see the difference between the two terms specifically. There are many cases that even if you seem to have understood the usage somehow, but actually you used it in the wrong way, or just remembered as the opposite. Let's see from the perspective of different purposes of utilization which indicator the site should take responsibility to make improvement, and which indicator the executive managers should use to make judgment.
Bekido Ritsu is written as the word Kadow Ritsu, isn't it? I learned for the first time that the purpose of usage is different.
Operating rate consisting the meaning of earn refers to the proportion of the time needed to produce the required production number based on the available overall operation capacity within the regular time. It can be said that it represents the loading rate that comes from demand. If anything, it is used as a management indicator rather than an indicator used on the site. For example, supposing there are equipments that can produce up to 2,000 units with overall operation capacity within the regular time. At this time, if the order is for 1,000 units, even though the capacity is 2,000 units, it is necessary only to produce 1,000 units, so the operating rate is 1,000/2,000, which is 50%. If there is an order for 2,500 units, the required production number will exceed the available overall operation capacity of 2,000 units within the regular time, so the situation has to be dealt with overtime work or working on a day off. The operating rate will be 2,500/2,000, which is 125%. This way of thinking is the basis of operating rate calculation.
Wait. So that is to say, operating rate depends on the sales, doesn't it? If there are no orders, the operating rate can be 0%, and if there are a large number of orders, it can be 200%.
That's right. Operating rate is an indicator that changes depending on the sales. In other words, there are something to pay attention to when using the operating rate. That is, don't try to force the raising of operating rate on site, such as the manufacturing department.
What? But why? Isn't it better to have a high operating rate?
That is because it will cause the waste of overproduction. You have learned that overproduction which will cause inventory more than necessary is the worst case. The accumulated inventories only to raise the operating rate indicator must be avoided.
I see. We must keep in mind that the required production number should just be taken as premise.
Yes. Next, I will explain the operating rate using car as an example to make the image easier to understand. Do you own a car? If you have one, what is the operating rate?
Yes, I have a car. I suppose that the operating time is about 2 hours at most because I only use it for commuting, shopping and going for a little trip.
Assuming bedtime is 8 hours, and the available overall operation time per day is 16 hours, so if you calculate the operating rate, it will be 2 hours per 16 hours, that is 12.5%. Mio, do you want to raise such a low operating rate?
No, I don't. It will definitely cause waste if I do that, so I won't.
That's right. Let's consider the operating rate in the factory in the same way. The operating rate is an indicator to judge how much the load should be when the equipment is operated when needed and when it is operated as much as needed. It can be said from the above that the operating rate represents the status of capital investment. If the expected quantity is sold, the operating rate will be 100%. On the other hand, if only half of quantity is sold not as expected, the operating rate will drop to 50%. And if the quantity sold doubles not as expected, the operating rate will be 200%.
That is to say, if the operating rate can be maintained at around 100%, it can be judged that skilled capital investment has been achieved. On the contrary, if the operating rate is 50% or 200%, does it mean that the capital investment is not going well, being insufficient or excessive?
That's right. Operating rate is the measure to judge whether the capital investment is going well, and how is the load status of the equipment based on the market environment.
I see. Therefore, it is not suitable for the site to use as a daily indicator, isn't it?
Yes. Top management must have a correct understanding of the facts and think about how to respond to the situation.
Mr. Kai, what should be done when the operating rate is stagnant over the long term? For example, as shown in this figure, what should we do if the operating rate has been around 50% for several months in a row compared to the initial plan and the same trend is expected to continue in the future?
That's a good question. In such cases, we should consider countermeasures such as performing order expansion strategy to increase orders or improving the operating rate by aggregating the load by disposing or idling the unnecessary equipment.
I see. Surely the countermeasure should not only be considered only on-site, but must be considered primarily by top management.
Here is an explanation of precautions for everyone who is studying with us. In the explanation so far, we have explained the definition of the operating rate in Toyota production system. Please pay attention that the definition of operating rate may differ for the concepts other than Toyota production system. For example, the concept of operational availability, which will be explained below, sometimes is defined as the operating rate. Please check thoroughly the definition of management indicators adopted by your company. Next, let's see the operational availability, Kadow Ritsu. Operational availability refers to the proportion of time an equipment functions properly when needed. It can be said that it represents the reliability of equipment brought about by maintenance. For example, assuming equipment was tried to be operated for 8 hours. However, what is the percentage of operational availability, Kadow Ritsu, when troubles occur and the operating time is actually 6 hours? In this case, it is calculated as 6 hours per 8 hours, and the operational availability, Kadow Ritsu, is 75%. Of course, the site should aim to keep troubles to zero as much as possible and finish production in the shortest time. Therefore, if the period of time the equipment needed to be operated is 8 hours, we must strive to achieve the state that the equipment is operated for 8 hours. That is to say, the operational availability, Kadow Ritsu, should always be aimed to achieve 100%, and it is an indicator that the site should take responsibility to improve. It can be said from the above that operational availability, Kadow Ritsu, represents the status of equipment usage. The less time the equipment is stopped, the better it is operated. Mio, can you give examples about the factor that hinders the operation of the equipment?
Yes, I suppose various troubles and necessary work will hinder the operation of equipment, which includes equipment failure, such as major stoppage and minor stoppage, changeover time and switching time, equipment maintenance time and cleaning time.
That's right. For example, it should take 5 hours with the original equipment capacity if nothing happens, but it may take 10 hours due to changeover or equipment failure. It is very important to figure out the way to reduce such hindrances, and the time saved by the reduction can be used properly to operate the equipment.
I see. What is the formula for the operational availability, Kadow Ritsu?
The formula for the operational availability is actual produced quantity x standard cycle time total operating hour. To be represented in the diagram, the pink part is the hindrance to be reduced.
That is to say, it is a major proposition for the manufacturing site to figure out how to reduce the hindrances and bring actual produced quantity x cycle time closer to total operating hour.
That's right. It is essential to constantly aim for 100% operational availability, bekido ritsu, on the site, and make improvements on a daily basis.
Now I quite understand that operating rate, bekido ritsu, is an important indicator for management, and operational availability is an important indicator for the site. Now, we make a summary of today's lecture. First, let's summarize what kind of indicator the operating rate is. Operating rate refers to the proportion of demand based on the available overall operation within the regular time and an indicator to judge the status of capital investment. Instead of trying to force it to raise on site, improvement strategy must be considered, including the need for expanding orders and aggregating the equipment. Next, let's summarize what kind of indicator the operational availability, bekido ritsu, is. Operational availability refers to the proportion of time equipment functions properly when needed and an indicator representing how well the equipment is used. It must be managed on-site daily and aim to achieve 100%. Let's improve the operational availability by taking measures to reduce the equipment failure and shorten changeover time at the manufacturing site. That's all about today's lecture, so, see you at the next theme.